A widow in rural Missouri kept a wooden bench by her back door for 60 years, and on that bench sat three things that never moved: a boot brush worn down to the nub, a tin can full of clothespins, and a folded burlap sack for the kindling. Her grandchildren came to visit in the summers, and the first thing she taught each one of them, before she taught them anything else, was how to knock the mud off their boots on that brush before they came through her door. Not because the floor mattered so much, because a child who learns to wipe his own boots learns in that small motion that he is not the only one who lives in the house. She was gone many years ago now, and the bench went with the house when it sold. And somewhere a family that never knew her walks past that back step without the first idea of what it once meant. There was a time, not so very long ago, when an American child did not sit down to supper until the work was done. Not as a punishment, not as a bargain struck between a tired mother and a stubborn boy. It was simply the shape of the day. The chores came first, and supper came after. And a child understood by the age of 6 that the two were joined together the way morning was joined to night. What follows are 25 of those chores, the small, forgotten labors that filled the hours between the end of school and the call to the table. The work that built something in a child that nobody knew was being built until it was gone. This channel exists for one reason: to remember how American families lived, how they raised their children, how they kept their homes, and how they held one another together through hard years and lean ones before so much of it slipped away unnoticed. If you believe these old ways are worth holding on to, take a moment to subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it tells this channel that somewhere out there a person still believes these stories are worth the telling. That is all the encouragement a thing like this needs to keep going. Let us begin where the list begins, at number 25, and work our way down to the one chore that mattered most of all. Number 25 was bringing in the wood. In the hill country of West Virginia and Tennessee, in the farmhouses of Nebraska, in any home that still burned wood or coal for heat or for the cook stove, the wood box by the kitchen had to be full before dark. A child learned the weight of an armload of split oak. He learned that green wood would not catch, and that the dry wood lived at the back of the pile under the eave. He learned to stack it so it would not topple. His arms ached and his hands picked up splinters, and he carried load after load until the box was heaped to the top. And when the cold came down in the night, that wood was the difference between a warm kitchen and a cold one. The child who filled the box was rarely told he had done a good thing, but he slept knowing the house was warm because of him, and that knowing was worth more than the telling. Number 24 was filling the wood box's quiet cousin, the kindling sack. Smaller hands could do this one. A child would go along the fence line and the woodlot, gathering the small dry sticks, the bark, the pine cones, the splinters left from the splitting. He would fill the burlap sack and set it by the stove so that the morning fire could be coaxed to life before the house woke. There is a particular thing a child knows when he is the one who gathered what makes the morning warm. He is up before the others in the gray cold, and he is useful. That feeling does not have a name, but every child who did it remembers it. Number 23 was feeding the animals. The chickens at dusk, the hogs in their pen, the dog on the back step, the barn cats that earned their keep on the mice. A farm child in the Ozarks knew the animals depended on him, and that they would go hungry if he forgot, and that there was no forgetting allowed where a living creature was concerned. He scattered the feed. He carried the slop bucket. He broke the ice on the water trough in winter with the heel of his boot. The animals did not thank him either, but a boy who has been responsible for keeping something else alive carries that responsibility into everything he touches for the rest of his days. Number 22 was gathering the eggs. This was often the smallest child's first real chore, the first work entrusted to hands that were barely big enough for it. A little girl in rural Alabama would carry her basket out to the hen house, reach carefully under the warm hens, and bring the eggs back without cracking a single one. It taught a gentleness that hurrying could break. It taught her that the family ate because she had gone out and gathered. She was 4, perhaps 5, and already she belonged to the work of the household. Already she mattered to the supper that came. Number 21 was hauling the water. Before every house had a tap at the sink. Water came from a well or a spring or a pump in the yard, and somebody had to carry it. That somebody was very often a child. 2 buckets, one in each hand, the weight pulling at the shoulders, the cold water sloshing over the rim and down the leg. Water for cooking, water for washing, water for the animals, water for the Saturday bath. A child in the coal country of West Virginia made that trip a dozen times a day and thought nothing of it because the water did not carry itself and there was no one else to do it. We turn a handle now and clean water comes without a thought. The child who hauled it knew exactly what it cost. Number 20 was beating the rugs. On a clear day, the rugs came up off the floor and out over the clothesline or the porch rail, and a child took the rug beater, that looping wire paddle, and went at them until the dust flew out in clouds. It was hard work, and it made you sneeze and your arms gave out before the job was done, and you kept going anyway. The house was cleaner because of it, and there was something honest in it, something a child could see with his own eyes. The dust leaving the rug and the rug going back down clean. Work you could see the result of. We have forgotten how much a child needs that. Number 19 was sweeping. The kitchen floor after every meal, the porch every morning, the walk out front before company came. A broom was put into a child's hands young, and he learned the corners, the under the table, the behind the door. It seems like nothing. It was not nothing. A child who sweeps a floor learns that a home does not keep itself, that order is something a person makes and remakes every single day, and that the making of it is nobody's job in particular and therefore everybody's. The boy with the broom was learning to belong to a place by tending it. Number 18 was the dishes, and there was nothing optional about the dishes. After every supper, the table was cleared and the dishes were washed and dried and put away. And in most homes, the children did it. One washed, one dried, one put away. And they argued over who got which job, and they did it anyway. Every night, 365 nights a year. The water was hot enough to redden the hands. The dish towel was a flour sack, worn soft. And in that small nightly labor, side by side at the sink, brothers and sisters learned to work together at something nobody wanted to do. The talking that happened over those dishes is gone now and cannot be recovered, but it was some of the realest talking a family ever did. Number 17 was setting the table. Before the supper came to it, the table had to be made ready, and a younger child could be trusted with this. A fork on the left, a knife and spoon on the right, a folded napkin, a glass, the plates counted out, one for every chair. It taught a child to think of the whole family at once, to count the heads and lay a place for each, to make ready a space where everyone would be gathered. The child who set the table was the one who made the gathering possible. He was small, but the supper could not begin without what he had done. Number 16 was shelling and snapping. When the garden came in, the work came with it, and the children sat on the porch steps with a bowl in their laps and snapped the beans or shelled the peas or husked the corn for hours in the long summer evenings. The thumbnail split the pod. The peas rolled into the bowl. The pile of empty pods grew at the feet. It was slow and it was tedious, and a child's mind wandered. And the grandmother sat there snapping right alongside, and the stories came out in that slow hour the way they never came out anywhere else. A child learned patience there without anyone ever using the word. Number 15 was weeding the garden. Down on the knees in the dirt between the rows, pulling what did not belong so that what did belong could grow. A child learned to tell the weed from the seedling, which is a harder thing than it sounds and takes a season to learn. He learned that the garden that fed the family in August had to be tended in June by somebody who would not eat the reward for months. He was doing today's work for a meal that was a long way off. There is no lesson harder for a child to learn, and none more worth the learning. Let us stop here for a moment because something needs to be said plainly. These were not just chores. We hear that word now, chores, and we think of a list stuck to a refrigerator with a magnet, a thing parents nag about and children resist. A battle fought fresh every single day in 10 million homes. But that is not what these were. Every one of these small labors was a thread, and the threads were what tied a child to the household. The child who filled the woodbox was warm in the house he had warmed. The child who fed the animals ate the eggs he had made possible. The child who hauled the water drank it. There was no gap between the work and the life, no allowance handed over as a wage, no debate about whether it was fair. The work was simply how a person took part in the family that kept him alive. And what we have done, without ever meaning to, is sever that thread. We have built homes where a child can take everything and contribute nothing, where the warmth and the food and the clean floor all arrive as if by magic, requiring nothing of him. And then we wonder why he does not feel that he belongs to anything. He was never given the chance to. Number 14 was hanging the wash. On wash day, the wet clothes came out heavy from the wringer, and a child carried the basket to the line and handed the pieces up, or pinned them himself if he was tall enough, and learned which way the shirts hung and how the clothespins gripped and how you spaced them so the wind would dry them faster. A girl in Wisconsin learned to read the weather by weather. The wash would dry before the rain. The sheets snapped in the wind. They came in smelling of sun, in a way no machine has ever managed since, and the child who hung them out and brought them in had a hand in the simple decency of a family in clean clothes. Number 13 was bringing in the wash, which was its own chore and its own art. You watched the sky. You felt the cloth. You brought it in before the dew or the rain, and you folded it warm off the line, and the folding was a thing a mother and a child did together, each holding two corners, walking toward each other, the sheet folded between them like a small dance done 1,000 times without a word. Some of the gentlest moments in an American childhood happened in the folding of laundry that nobody now remembers folding. Number 12 was mending and darning. A girl, and sometimes a boy, learned to thread a needle and sew a button back on, and darned the hole in the heel of a sock over a wooden egg. Nothing was thrown away that could be fixed. A child in a household on a fixed income learned that a torn thing was not a ruined thing, that a hole was a problem with a solution that lived in the sewing basket, and that her own two hands could make a worn thing whole again. We throw away more in a week now than those families threw away in a year. The child who darned the sock knew the value of the sock, and knowing the value of small things is the beginning of knowing the value of everything. If any of this is stirring something in you, if you grew up with even one of these chores, or watched your mother or your grandmother do them, take a moment and leave a comment. Tell where you are from, and tell which one you remember. This channel reads every one of them. There is something quiet and good about seeing how widespread this once was. How a child in Alabama and a child in Wisconsin and a child in the hills of West Virginia were all doing the same small labors at the same hour of the evening, all across this country, in homes that never knew one another. Those comments are a kind of remembering. Add your voice to them. Number 11 was churning the butter. The cream went into the churn, and the dasher went up and down, and a child's arms learned the long monotony of it. The waiting for the butter to come, the change in the sound, and the wait, when at last it did. It took forever. A child's whole patience was spent on it. And then there was butter, real butter, made by his own arms, and it went on the bread at supper, and he had made it. There is a satisfaction in that which no store-bought thing has ever given a child since. Number 10 was tending the younger ones. The oldest children raised the youngest, and this was not thought remarkable. A girl of 10 in Missouri minded 3 little ones while her mother worked, changed them, fed them, kept them from the well and the road and the stove. A boy walked his small sister to school and home again every day and would have fought anyone who troubled her. The children were responsible for each other. They were not each handed over to some paid stranger or some glowing screen. They were given to one another, and in the giving, they learned what it is to be answerable for another human life. The 10-year-old who kept the baby safe became an adult who knew how to keep a promise. Number 9 was running to the store. A child was sent to the corner store with a note and a few coins, and the trust that he would bring back the right thing and the right change. A nickel's worth of this, a loaf of that, put it on the account and tell Mr. So-and-so we will settle Friday. The child carried money he did not own and bought what the family needed and came straight back. And in that errand, he was trusted, plainly and completely. And a trusted child becomes a trustworthy man. We do not send our children anywhere now. We track them on screens and drive them door to door. We have kept them safe, perhaps, but we have not let them be trusted. And a child who is never trusted never learns that he can be. Let us pause again, because there is a truth here that the modern world does not want to look at directly. We were told, somewhere along the way, that childhood should be free of labor, that a child's only job was to play, and to learn, and to be happy, and that work was a burden we should be glad to lift from their small shoulders. It sounded like kindness. It sounded like progress. And so, household by household, year by year, we lifted the work away. We bought the machines that hauled the water and washed the dishes, and we told ourselves we had given our children a gift. But watch closely what was actually traded. The child who had no chores also had no place in the working life of the home. He became a guest in his own house, served and tended and entertained, contributing nothing and therefore needed by no one. And a human being who is needed by no one, no matter how young, feels a hollowness he cannot name. We did not free our children. We unmoored them. We gave them everything and asked of them nothing. And a person of whom nothing is ever asked never discovers what he is capable of carrying. Number 8 was blacking the stove and tending the fire. The cook stove had to be cleaned and the firebox tended, and a child learned to bank a fire so it would hold through the night and to bring it up again in the morning. He learned that fire was useful and dangerous both, that it had to be respected and could not be neglected, and that the warmth of the whole house came down to whether he had done his work right. A child trusted with fire is a child told, in the plainest way a family can say it, that he is no longer a baby. The trust and the danger came together, and the child rose to meet them. Number 7 was scrubbing. The floors on hands and knees with a brush and a bucket, the porch steps, the front stoop, the pots that the washing up could not get clean. A child in a coal miner's household in West Virginia scrubbed the coal dust off the porch every single day, knowing it would be back tomorrow. And that is the lesson hidden in scrubbing, the hardest one, that some work is never finished. That you do it again and again, not because it stays done, but because the doing of it is what keeps the world decent. The grown person who can face an endless task without despair learned it on his knees with a scrub brush as a child. Number 6 was shoveling. Snow off the walk in the Wisconsin winter, coal into the scuttle, ash out of the stove, a path to the outhouse and the barn. The shovel was nearly as tall as the child, and he leaned his whole small weight into it and cleared the way so the family could get out and the morning could begin. Cold work, early work, work done before the sun was fully up, and the path was clear because of him, and the others walked it without thinking, and he did not need them to think of it. He knew. Number 5 was polishing and shining. The Sunday shoes lined up on a newspaper, the tin of polish, the rag and the brush, and a child shined every pair in the family for church the next morning. He learned that you put your best foot forward for the things that matter, that there is a dignity in a polished shoe that has nothing to do with money, that a poor family in clean and cared-for clothes holds its head as high as anyone. The shoes were old and resoled and shined to a gleam, and the family walked into church on Sunday looking after itself, and the child with the Polish rag had given them that. Number 4 was helping put up the food. When the garden came in all at once, the kitchen became a place of urgent labor that went on for days, and every hand was needed. The canning, the blanching, the filling of the jars, the long boil, the rows of glass jars cooling on the counter that would feed the family clear through the winter. A child carried the jars and snapped the beans and watched his grandmother's hands move with the certainty of 50 summers, and he learned that food did not come from a store, that it came from the ground and the work and the foresight to put it by. The child who helped fill the cellar shelves in August understood in his bones in January where his supper came from. Almost no child alive now understands that. They have never once been hungry in a way that did not end in 5 minutes with something from a bright package. And so they have never learned that a full cellar is not a given but an achievement, wrung from the earth by people who loved them. Number 3 was caring for the old and the sick. A child was sent down the road with a covered plate for the widow who lived alone, or sat with a grandfather who could no longer get out of his bed, or read aloud to a great-aunt whose eyes had failed. The young were put in the service of the old, plainly and as a matter of course. And a child learned early that age was coming for everyone, and that you cared for those it had already reached. This is perhaps the chore we have lost most completely. We have moved the old away into places of their own, out of the home and out of the child's daily sight, and a child now can grow to adulthood, having never once carried a plate to a person who could not rise to get it. He has been spared something, they would say. He has been robbed of something, this channel would say. The child who tended the dying learned the one thing that makes a person fully human, which is that we are here to care for one another all the way to the end. Number 2 was the work of the seasons that fell to the whole family and to the children most of all. The spring planting and the fall harvest, the haying, the picking, the gathering. A boy in Nebraska worked the fields beside his father from the time he was big enough to be useful, and the work was hard and long, and sometimes it broke him down, and his father worked right there beside him and did not break. And the boy learned what a man was by watching one. The work was the teaching. There was no other school for it. A father did not sit his son down and explain to him what duty meant or what it was to provide. He took the boy out into the field at dawn, and they worked until dark, and the boy understood, without a single word being spoken, that this was what it was to take care of the people you loved. You got up, you went out, you did the work. You did it again tomorrow, and the family ate because you did. That was the whole of it, and it was everything. And, number one, the first chore, the oldest chore, the one beneath all the others, number one was simply this: to be counted on. Not any single task, but the whole of it together. The understanding that lived in a child by the age of 7 that the family was a thing held up by many hands, and that his were among them. That if he did not do his part, someone else would have to carry it. Someone already tired, someone he loved. That he was not a guest in the home, but a member of it, with a member's duties and a member's place at the table that he had helped to set, eating the food he had helped to grow and put up and cook, in the warmth of the fire he had helped to build, in a house he had helped to keep, to be counted on. That was the chore. Everything else was only the form it took. And a child who grew up being counted on became an adult that other people could count on. A husband, a wife, a parent, a neighbor, the steady kind of person that a community is built out of. We do not give our children that anymore. We have arranged their lives so that nothing depends on them, and we have called it love. And we cannot understand why so many of them reach adulthood feeling that they are not needed by anyone and never have been. They were never given the one thing every child is starving for, which is to be necessary. So here is the small thing to carry out of this video and into your own week. Find one chore, just one, and give it to a child in your life and give it to them for keeps. Not as a punishment and not as a bargain for screen time, but as a thing that is now theirs to do because they belong to the household. Let them set the table. Let them carry in something heavy. Let them feed the dog every single day in the rain and when they do not feel like it because the dog is depending on them, and do not thank them too much for it because the point is not the praise. The point is that they learn the quiet, steadying weight of being counted on. That is a gift no machine and no allowance can ever give them. It is one of the few gifts that costs nothing and lasts a lifetime. If you found something in this video worth keeping, subscribe so that the next one finds its way to you. Share it with someone who would understand it. The brother who grew up beside you doing these same chores, the mother who raised you to do them, the friend from church whose children might still learn them, and in the comments, leave the name of the one chore your grandmother or your father gave you that you have never once handed down to a child of your own. Say it plainly. That is how a thing like this survives, not in books and not in museums, but in one person remembering out loud so that another person remembers too. They were never just chores. They were how a child learned that he belonged to something and that something belonged to him. We can still give them that. We have only to ask something of them again.